What's up everyone, Darcblade here with another Hunter's Guide to Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. In this video, I'm going to be bringing you an endgame build, this time for the Darcblade. Now, as always, what is an endgame build? Well, it's a build constructed from endgame materials, armor pieces, weaponry, decorations, and more. It does feature talismans and Krios crafting, however, it's not to the extent that it's unobtainable. Now, a quick reminder that if you find these builds helpful or enjoyable, please consider leaving a like on the video as well as subscribing to the channel, as I try to bring you a variety of builds for a variety of different playstyles. Now, when it comes to the Darcblade, it's an interesting weapon in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. It has two unique playstyles, with the condensed spinning slash playstyle and the super amped elemental discharge spam playstyle. The condensed spinning slash playstyle, or savage axe mode, as that's how I remember it from Monster Hunter World Iceborne, is definitely the playstyle you want to go if you want to deal the most damage. However, the super amped elemental discharge playstyle is a little bit more of a comfier build, as it adds more quality of life options and allows you to deal fixed damage, so long as you time your super amped elemental discharge attack correctly. And so with that being said, I present to you the super amped elemental discharge build. Like I said, this is an all-rounder build featuring strong damage output combined with defensive elements and quality of life elements. So for this build, you'll need the Azuchi True Mask H, you'll then need the Onmyo Kari Ginu, Onmyo Teku, Onmyo Atobi, and the Flaming Espinasse Heals. For your petalace, this is down to personal preference, but as we're going for a balance here, I'd recommend the Absolute petalace for some extra health. And then for your talisman, you want to get a talisman that has the ability to get at least offensive guard to level 2 on it. Decoration slots are also desired. As for your weapon, I'm going for the weapon that has the highest possible raw attack for the Darcblade, which is the Serra Sediment Plus, which is the Diablos Darcblade. As for the Krios crafting on the weapon, it's kind of down to personal preference. I've gone for a rampage slot upgrade as well as an attack increase. But another alternative would simply to be increasing the attack as much as possible. It's down to personal preference. As for the Rampage skill, I've gone for the Defense Master Jewel, which gives us the Defense Grinder skill, which allows us to recover sharpness when we're blocking attacks. I've gone for this because I want to activate Offensive Guard as much as possible, so I'll be blocking quite a bit to get that buff, and in doing so, we'll also regenerate our sharpness. So as for the decorations, you've got a fair few to play around with, so I've gone for Jumping Jewels, which is optional for a point in the Evade Extender skill. I've then gone for Grinder Jewels to max out Speed Sharpening, Artillery Jewels to max out the Artillery skill, Guardian Jewels to max out Offensive Guard, Tenderizer Jewels to max out Weakness Exploit, at least one critical jewel for a point in Crit Boost, Razor Jewels to max out Razor Sharp, Attack Jewels to max out Attack Boost, a Magazine Jewel to max out the Load Shell skill, and then a Brace Jewel for a point in Flinch Free, but this is optional. So if you've done what I've done here, you'll have a build with a raw attack of 452 with no element. We'll also have White Sharpness. You'll have negative 30% affinity, which can be potentially 20% when you take into account Weakness Exploit. To be honest, such a low affinity means that we didn't have to invest heavily in critical boost, as we won't be critting all the time. But this is one of the trade-offs when you play with the super amp elemental discharge spam, as the fire bursts are going to be our main source of damage and they cannot crit, so you don't have to invest heavily in affinity. Yes, it is worth having a little bit of affinity, as the actual swinging portion of the super amped elemental discharge attack can still crit, but the fire explosions cannot. They deal fixed damage based off of your attack. Anyway, you'll then have a strong defense of 751 that is strong against fire and dragon, but unfortunately weaker to the other elements, especially thunder. When it comes to the switch skills, these are down to personal preference, but I'd recommend taking the condensed elemental slash as well as counter peak performance, as we want to be performing the super amped elemental discharge as much as possible. So when it comes to the skills, first of all you have attack boost at level 7. Attack boost is a skill that increases our raw attack, and at level 4 or above grants us a percentage bonus to our raw attack as well. You'll then have agitator at level 5, which is a skill that kicks in whenever a monster becomes enraged. When this happens, we'll gain increased raw attack and bonus affinity. You'll then have Weakness Exploit at level 3. Weakness Exploit is a skill that increases our affinity by up to 50% when we're attacking monster weak points. Like I said, we didn't invest heavily in affinity based skills, but it is still nice to have some, and Weakness Exploit is one of the skills that we don't have to invest heavily in that gives us a large affinity boost. You'll then have Razor Sharp at level 3, negating sharpness loss 50% of the time we attack. You'll then have Stamina Surge at level 3, a byproduct of the armor, but it's still useful for the Darcblade when it comes to blocking attacks, as it increases how quickly we can get our stamina back from blocking said attacks. You'll then have Offensive Guard at level 3. Offensive Guard is a skill that when we perfectly time a block, will gain an increase to our raw attack. And as the Charge Blade is able to guard counter a lot of attacks, it means that we want to aim at performing these and then following them up with a super amped elemental discharge attack that has that Offensive Guard attack bonus to it. You'll then have Artillery at level 3, increasing the damage of our file bursts, which are the explosion portions of our attacks with the Charge Blade. You'll then have Speed Sharpening at level 3, which is an optional skill in all honesty. This allows us to sharpen our weapon quite quickly. You'll then have Embolden at level 3. Embolden is a skill that makes a monster more likely to become enraged. This is because it doesn't require as much damage from us to enrage a monster. But when a monster becomes enraged, we'll gain an increased 40 defense. It will also give us increased invincibility frames when dodging, and it will lower the impact of attacks while we're guarding. This is the reason we haven't invested in any guard skills, as we are relying on Embolden to be able to block attacks with minimal impact and perform our follow-up guard reactions. This also works well in unison with Agitator, as when a monster becomes enraged we'll also get the damage increase from that skill. Anyway, you'll then have Burst at level 3. Burst is a skill that when we continuously land hits on a monster will gain increased raw attack and elemental damage. You'll then have Spare Shot at level 2, which is a byproduct of the armor we're using. It's not needed on this build whatsoever as it's a gunner skill. You'll then have Load Shells at level 2, which is a skill that affects both the Gun Lance and Charge Blade. When it comes to the Charge Blade, it increases the Charge Blade's file capacity, in that when we're actually charging up our files, once they turn yellow and we store them, it will store all 5 files instead of having to charge them to the red level. So it saves a little bit of time and is a bit more efficient. Anyway, you'll then have Crit Boost at level 1, increasing the damage of our critical hits, but only applies to the raw portion, not the elemental ailment portion, or in this case, the file bursts. You'll then have Evade Extender at level 1, increasing the distance at which we hop, dodge and evade. You'll then have Poison Resistance at level 1, which reduces the number of times you take poison damage. You'll then have Flinch Free at level 1, a result of the Brace Jaw, which prevents minor knockbacks from monsters as well as our allies. Anyway, next up is Carving Pro at level 1. A lot of these level 1 skills are a result of the Krios crafting. A lot of them are optional as well. Most of the essential skills we've already covered. But Carving Pro at level 1 prevents knockback when we're actually carving materials from monsters. You'll then have Wirebug Whisperer at level 1, which extends the duration that we can keep additional wirebugs by 30%. You'll then have Adrenaline Rush at level 1, which is a useful skill as performing a perfectly timed evade increases our raw attack. So we don't always have to block a monster's attack. If we're not ready to perform a super amped elemental discharge attack, sometimes it's better to roll out of the way to get the Adrenaline Rush boost. You'll then have Spirit Bird Call at level 1, which is a useful quality of life skill, and I always recommend it, especially if you're playing on the Switch, as during a hunt you'll receive the effect of a random Spirit Bird at fixed intervals. This only applies to normal quests, not arena quests, but it negates the need to always go out of your way to get Spirit Birds, as they'll eventually come to you. And then finally you'll have Intrepid Heart at level 1, a useful quality of life and defensive skill, which gives our hunter a blue bar above their health bar. When this fills up, should we take a hit that would knock back our hunter, it will negate the damage reaction and reduce the damage taken from that attack, helping us stay in the fight longer and potentially saving our life. So there we have it, those are all the essential skills for this build. But of course, Krios crafting does play a part in endgame builds, as it is an endgame activity. But I haven't really gone to the extent where every single piece of armor features weakness exploit, attack boost, crit boost, so on and so forth. Yes, one or two of them may have a point in it, but most of the time I go for simply upgrading the decoration slots if possible. So with the Atsushi True Mask H, I've got a point in weakness exploit, probably the rarest upgrade out of this bunch. With the Omnio Karaginu, I've got a point in poison resistance, as well as a tier 4 decoration upgrade, as well as a tier 3 decoration slot upgrade. For the Onmyo Teku, I've got a point in attack boost. For the Onmyo Ateabi, I've got a point in the burst skill. And then for the Flaming Espinas Heals, I've got a tier 2 decoration slot upgrade, an additional tier 1 decoration slot, and a point in the Spirit Bird Call skill. So there we have it, that is the super amped elemental discharge build for the Charge Blade. But every build out there, even these endgame builds, come with various pros and cons. No build is absolutely perfect. Even these endgame builds, whilst they may be strong, they may be difficult to craft. When it comes to this super amped elemental discharge build, its biggest pro is its versatility. It's a versatile build. Being able to deal decent damage combined with defensive and quality of life skills, it gives you quite a comfy build for taking on Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. The next pro for this build is that it's able to deal fixed damage, which means that you don't have to necessarily worry about a monster's elemental or element resistances. As we're focusing on the super amped elemental discharge playstyle, we're relying on our file burst to deal the meat of the damage, which, like I said, deals fixed damage and ignores defenses. And then finally for the pros is that this build has skills that synergize well with one another. Embolden combined with Agitator, as well as skills like Attack Boost and more, they all work well together to give us a strong endgame build. But of course there are cons. One of the biggest cons, which to be honest is more a con against the super amped elemental discharge spam playstyle, is that you will see a drop in your damage output should you mistime your super amped elemental discharge attack. So timing is needed with this build. And unfortunately the other con is, unfortunately, we do lack guard up on this build, which means that we cannot guard point unblockable attacks. This is something to remember. Instead, roll out of the way of them to avoid them rather than going for that guard reaction by blocking them. But regardless of the pros and cons, this is still a very comfy build to use for the Darcblade. Like I said, once you've got your timing down when fighting monsters, you'll find that this build is capable of taking on most hunts with little difficulty. It may not have the highest possible DPS out there for a Darcblade build, but it can still take on pretty much anything in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. But what are your thoughts? Please leave a comment down below, and until next time, I've been Darcblade, bringing you another endgame build, this time for the Darcblade in Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak. Hope you enjoyed the video, thanks for watching, subscribe and like for more.